Hello everyone, and welcome to something you've probably never seen a VTuber do. An audiobook. Specifically, an audiobook of the trans Harry Potter fanfiction Hogwarts Bouquet by ElizabethEmerald on AO3, or Archive of Our Own. Before we get started, heavy content and trigger warning for the likes of severe and graphic depictions of child abuse, homophobia, transphobia, trauma, and the like. Now that that's out of the way, let's get started. Chapter 1. Away from the House of Dursley. Minerva McGonagall sat up in surprise as an owl tapped at her office window. It was summer, and Hogwarts was on holiday. She had been in the middle of working on her lesson plans for the coming year's transfiguration courses. She quickly opened the window to allow the owl to enter. She was surprised to see that the letter was from Arabella Figg. Mrs. Figg was stationed at Privet Drive, watching the young Harry Potter. She opened the letter and was even more surprised to find it written in an old war cipher. Squibs like Arabella couldn't use magical means to hide their writing, so they were dependent on more mundane methods. Minerva was halfway out of her seat, going to run to the headmaster's office, as she started translating the letter. If Arabella was sending encrypted letters again, it couldn't mean anything good for the Potter boy. However, the first line of the letter stopped her in her tracks and stopped her heart as well. Don't tell Albus. Minerva apparated into Mrs. Figg's backyard only a few minutes later, the letter still tightly clutched in her fist. She slipped her wand back away, though kept her hand near it. Arabella was at the back door waiting for her as she stepped up to it. She opened her mouth but was silenced by a wave. She followed as Arabella led her quickly through the house to her front sitting room. A young boy that she knew was turning 10 soon, though he looked far younger and smaller than that, sat in the living room and played with one of Arabella's cats. Minerva could see the bruise on his neck from here. A clear handprint. An adult's handprint. There was another bruise on the boy's arm, and from the strange way he was holding it, looked like it might be broken. Her heart broke for the boy. She must have made some noise, because Harry suddenly whirled around, and upon seeing her, cowered back against the wall. The cats around him scattered at his sudden movement. He desperately tried to protect his head with his good arm, as he pressed himself against the wall, trying to make himself as small as possible. If her heart had broken earlier, seeing this tore the broken pieces of her heart out of her chest and flung them against the wall. When she had first seen him, she had thought that some Death Eater had found and attacked him. But this was not the reaction of someone who had just been attacked. This was the reaction of someone who is far more used to violence than kindness. Harry, having never met her, expected her to attack him right away. She needed to calm him down, and quickly. It was imperative that she get him out of here and to proper medical care, if she had any hope of him surviving long enough to make it to Hogwarts. She knew there were calming spells, but she didn't want his first experience with magic to be his emotions being stolen from him when he wouldn't even be able to understand what was happening. Instead, she looked around the room, and citing the numerous cat pictures on the walls, nodded her head and changed. Minerva dropped to all fours in cat form, moving quietly and slowly up to the boy. It took him several seconds to notice that the strange woman who he had seen had disappeared, and it took him several more to uncover his body and stop cowering in fear. She approached him cautiously until he felt comfortable reaching out to pet her ears. She never let people touch her when she was a cat, much less pet her, but for Harry, really for any child in this position, she would make an exception. It takes several more minutes for Harry's panicked breathing to calm. This close, Minerva can see the myriad of bruises, cuts, and burns on his body. She can also see that he's almost skeletally thin. He keeps shivering and glancing over his shoulder, now on the watch for any strange adults. Arabella is watching him, trying to stay relaxed and show him he's safe. When he finally is no longer hyperventilating, Minerva steps back from him. He watches her go, a small look of sadness on his face. Then, keeping eye contact with him, She transfigures herself right before his eyes. Normally, she would rise to a standing position from her feline form, but dignity be damned, she did not want to scare him again. His eyes widened, almost bugging out of his head, but he didn't panic again. Maybe he was just all out of fear for the day. Or maybe the magic was just so amazing that he didn't think to be afraid. Minerva counted her blessings either way, as she sat with her robes splayed around her, eyes level with that of the small boy before her. "Are you magic?" Harry whispered breathlessly. "Yes, I am," Minerva responded simply, "and I believe so are you." "I'm not magic, I'm a freak." Harry's simple statement came with the assuredness of hearing it far too much. How often had his aunt and uncle called him a freak that this was his ingrained response? "You are not a freak." She tried to keep her anger out of her voice. She didn't want Harry to shut down again. "You are an amazing child. Since you like magic so much, would you like to see some more?" Harry nodded eagerly. She could almost see him not believe her words. This was going to take some work. She waved her wand at the wood Arabella kept for the fireplace. She transfigured the wood into small toy dragons and charmed them so that they animated and began playing around Harry's lap. While he was occupied, she stood and returned to Arabella's side. "I sent letter after letter to Dumbledore," Arabella whispered. "I told him they weren't treating him well. I told him he had bruises and marks from them." "His aunt and uncle did this to him?" Minerva did her best to quiet the venom in her voice. She wasn't sure she succeeded. She watched from the corner of her eye as Harry watched them talk. Even with the magic toys, he still watched the adults, wary for any threat. "Yes, his uncle mostly. His aunt and cousin aren't much better. Dumbledore said again and again that keeping him there is what's best for him." Arabella shook her head. "But look at him, and tell me that this is what's best for him." Minerva shook her head as well. Arabella continued, obviously happy that she had agreed with her. "The bruises and cuts are bad enough, but the broken arm? It looks like his uncle choked him. If he gets killed before he gets to Hogwarts, what will all of Dumbledore's preparations and plans amount to?" Minerva put a comforting hand on Arabella's arm. "You don't have to convince me. When I leave here, he's coming with me." Arabella almost sobbed in relief. Minerva would have some very strong words for Albus Dumbledore when this was over. If he had been ignoring Arabella's complaints for so long that she's built up this level of anxiety about it. However, the most important thing for the moment was Harry's safety. She took a deep breath, centering herself, forcing herself to be calm. Then she slowly approached Harry again. He was immediately on guard, though he didn't cower. But she could see he wanted to. She knelt down to his level, keeping her movements controlled as she did so. "Your name is Harry, is that correct?" He nodded his head. "My name is Minerva McGonagall. I knew your parents, James and Lily. I used to be their teacher. Would you like me to teach you as well?" "Would you teach me magic?" he asked, his voice quiet. She could barely hear him, even sitting beside him. "Yes, I will." McGonagall watched the boy's eyes light up. "But first, is there anything else you need from your uncle's house?" The joy in his eyes disappeared in a second, replaced by fear and horror. "I can't go back yet. They would be mad at me if I go back." "Harry, my dear boy," Minerva put all of her care and compassion into her voice. "They can be mad at you all they like. I will not let them lay a finger on you again." She could see the doubt in his eyes. She showed him her wand again. "I can do more with this than make toy dragons, and I promise you, your aunt and uncle will not hurt you again." She could still see some doubt, but at least now he nodded. She rose to her feet and offered him her hand. She didn't let the way he flinched from even that small gesture hurt her. She quickly went across the street to number 4, opening the locked door with a quick charm. Fortunately, it seemed that the Dursleys were out of the house today, no doubt why young Harry had been left with Mrs. Figg. "Get your things, Harry, and then we'll leave this place." Any remaining shattered remains of her heart broke further than smoldered with rage when Harry went to his small cupboard, pulled out his few belongings, and was back before she had even managed to work herself up to a proper fury. It took every ounce of her self-control not to unleash a quick bombarda onto the otherwise perfect interior to punish the Dursleys. Only for Harry's sake did she spare them. With Harry in tow and his few belongings in hand, Minerva relocked the door and returned to Arabella's house. She was about to flee back to her home when the older woman grabbed her arm. "As much as I'd hate it, you'd better obliviate me. Dumbledore's going to figure out he's gone sooner or later. If you have any hope of this plan working, I think it would be for the better that he not know where the boy is gone." Minerva grimaced. This would likely be painful for Arabella for the next few years. She would think she had lost the boy who lived, who she was supposed to watch. But she knew she could undo the spell as soon as Harry was safe, probably when he was 11 and starting his lessons at Hogwarts. An adult choosing a few years of worry was better than a child getting forced into another few years of abuse. She cast the spell. She carefully removed the memory of the owl she had sent to her, of her arrival, and of Harry's departure. If Aurors investigated, they would be able to determine that she had had her memory erased, but they still wouldn't be able to figure out the truth. With her tracks covered, Minerva held Harry tight to her, tossed a pinch of Floo powder into the fire, and vanished from Privet Drive in a flash of emerald fire. Over the next few weeks, the magical world would be suddenly whipped into an uproar. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, had vanished without a trace from his relatives' home. It will quickly come to light just how poorly they had treated him. The empty cupboard under the stairs proof enough without Vernon's disdain with which he spoke of the boy. Aurors might find traces of magical trespass, but could find no sign of what happened to the boy, or where he could have gone. Thank you for listening to Chapter 1 of Hogwarts Bouquet by ElizabethEmerald. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching.